Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name's Robert Gibson. I'm with the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, which kindly paid for me to go to COP24, and with Civic Exchange, which did the registration, which allowed me to go there. So I sort of represent both to a little bit. This picture you've got up front is of a Soviet-era sports stadium, which is the sort of core of where the climate conference was in Katowice. And one of the key context setters for the climate conference was the IPCC's report, which came out in October 2018 on the physics of 1.5 degrees. The IPCC had been asked how significant are the differences in climate between 1.5 and 2 degrees, and what would it take to hold climate change increase to 1.5. This slide here is a bit of a summary one, where they run through, and these bars that you can see going up are saying, okay, what happens on unique and threatened systems at 1 degree increase, which is where we are today, 1.5 and 2. And similarly with extreme weather events, global impacts, and there's things called large-scale singular events. And one of the issues on this is that the damage is not sort of linear with temperature increase, it's exponential. So 2 degrees is quite a lot worse than 1.5. And it's not just the individual things, it's the risk of feedback effects, these large-scale singular events causing, to some extent, runaway climate change. And one thing that gets talked about is the potential for some of these feedback effects to have a cascading event. One thing happens, and that pushes the next thing to happen, which pushes the next thing to happen, and before we know it, we're heading for a world of plus 6 degrees centigrade or something like that. So an example is you have the Arctic summer ice loss, which has already happened. When the ice is there, it reflects 80% of the sunshine. When it disappears, you get 80% of the sunshine being absorbed into the dark water. So the Arctic is warming much faster than the rest of the planet. And along with that, we have, of course, the fact that Greenland, with its large ice cap, is sitting right next to that sea. And so Greenland is now experiencing significant temperature increase. And it's thought that the sort of point of eventual no return on the Greenland ice cap is probably a 1.5 degrees centigrade. You get above that, and the whole of the Greenland ice cap will go, with an increase in sea level of 7 meters. We don't know how fast. It could take hundreds of years. So people say, well, not a problem. But you know, if Hong Kong were thinking about building this East Lantau metropolis, and that's presumably expected to be around for hundreds of years, we need to think about these issues. And when the Greenland ice cap goes, or as it's going, it's having an impact down the other end of the planet on West Antarctica, because as sea level starts to rise, you get increased impact on the ice sheets that are on off the shores of West Antarctica. And that can lead to a destabilization of the ice sheets on the land there, and then falling faster or sliding faster into the sea, and further sea level rise. So one thing, putting it in context, is you will have read, I'm sure, of the history that the world's been through many ice ages over the last 1,000,000+ years. And it goes around a sort of circle or cycle. It's driven by the Milankovitch cycles, the way in which the Earth's orbit changes over thousands of years and alters the extent to which sunshine hits the northern hemisphere and hence burns off the winter snows. And this graph here, the vertical is the temperature and the horizontal is the sea level. At the last glacial maximum, we were perhaps 4 degrees or 5 degrees cooler than today, and the sea level was 140 meters lower. You know, here in Hong Kong, we were some way inland with, you know, rivers running down between here and Daya Bay, etc. Now, what's going to happen if we warm the planet? And this is a schematic which says that, okay, at the start of the Industrial Revolution, we were at the sort of midpoint, the crosshairs on this graph, which is actually a bit cooler than the middle of the Holocene 5,000 years ago, because actually with the Milankovitch cycles, we were about to tip into another ice age. We were heading in that direction prior to the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And instead of that happening, we're now on a trajectory where temperature is increasing and sea level is slowly starting to rise. And if we are able to take good action and keep temperature increase down to 1.5 or 2 degrees, then hopefully we can stabilize Earth without too much temperature increase and without too much sea level rise. But if we're not careful, if we continue basically with business as usual, we'll go to this hothouse Earth condition where temperatures will be very much higher today and sea level will be very much higher than today. And once we get started up this trajectory, stopping will be very difficult. So what does the IPCC say? They say that to stabilize at 1.5 degrees, we need to be carbon neutral as a civilization by 2050. And there are different ways of getting there. Each of these lines on this big chart are a different scenario which they run, but just to pick 4 of them, which they did. And the comment here is that it's humanity's choice as to which, if we want 1.5 degrees, we can basically go for a low energy demand scenario. We can become monks. So if we all live like Lam Chiu Ying, yeah, if we all live like him, then we can get away without having to have carbon capture and storage. We can, rapidly reduce our energy consumption, but it means pretty much giving up air travel, cruise ships, meat consumption, air conditioning. It's a drastic change. So whilst the IPCC has done this, I don't think they believe that humanity is going to do it. So another one is you have great policies which get you there, but slower. And this orange bar here, this is carbon capture and storage. This is saying we are going to continue to burn fossil fuel, we're going to capture the CO2, and we're going to pump it underground. Put it back where the carbon came from. We had oil fields. Compressed carbon dioxide is similar to crude oil. If you get it under sufficient pressure, it can go and safely stay underground for a long time. We're also going to have this yellow bar, BECCS. Bioenergy carbon capture and storage. We grow organic matter, we burn it to generate electricity, we capture the CO2, and we pump it underground. And as you progress across here, you get more scenarios where we have more consumption, we keep more of our high carbon lifestyle, but we have greater need to capture. And you'll see this dark line is the net emissions. And you can see this goes very substantially negative in the second half of the century. So us not taking action quickly to get down means that our children and our grandchildren are going to have to do an awful lot more in the future. So the Poles, here we are, held this climate conference in Katowice, which is a grim place. The conference site was on an old coal mine. These are some of the old coal mine buildings in the snow here. In some ways, they're proud of their coal heritage. You go to the Katowice stand, and there's cages of coal on it. And I think the story and the idea is that this is where we've come from, and there are green bits up the front. This is where we're going to. But they've got a long way to go. This is a picture I took of a coal-fired power station on my way to the airport. And the air quality there on some days was such that you were recommended not to go out of doors. We complain about our air quality. The reason I'm talking now, by the way, rather than Lex is he's on back chat at the moment, arguing for better air quality objectives. But it's an example of where we need to move away from. So what happened inside the conference centre? Well, you have this enormous plenary room, and this was the bit where David Attenborough stood up and looked at all the government delegates and said, leaders of the world, lead. We need to move forwards. And then down the bottom is an example of one of the formal meetings. Here was the Talanoa on finance, and we had Nick Robbins here being incredibly strict, getting 40 people to talk for 2 minutes each to summarize up the input on finance. And, that's people talking at each other. It's not getting agreement, in my opinion. Now, I didn't go to the negotiations. I really can't contribute to them. I went to the fun bit of the COP. I went to the side events where we have different people getting together and talking about what the problems are and what the solutions are. The top here, we have the China Pavilion, which China, being such an important country, was always very well attended. They have people standing at the back most of the time. And I can't remember what this particular one was. They had one I went to which was in capture and storage, one which was the emissions trading scheme and so on. And if I can point out, we have two members of the People's Republic of China delegation, Agnes, who is going to talk to you in a minute, and Davy Kan. So two members of our Environmental Protection Department go as part of the Chinese delegation to the COP. And down the bottom, we have the European Pavilion with Michel Kante getting up and talking about the EU's long-term strategy, how the EU plans to become carbon neutral by 2050. And a session here where we had Canada, China, and the EU together talking about carbon pricing. So there is a lot of cooperation and looking for solutions. 23,000 people altogether who went to the COP, and a lot of them are looking at how can we solve this problem and move forwards. And we also had one presentation from Hong Kong where we've got the two people in the room, John Sayer and Maria Frances, who were reporting on this report, which they've been doing to monitor how Hong Kong is doing compared to the Paris commitment. Because Hong Kong's committed to the Paris Agreement. It's part of the People's Republic of China. The central government takes on the commitment, and we have to fall in with that. And this was the group of people who went there. We had two youth representatives who were doing a great job. So, this is the program going forward. Paris got the rulebook done, which is a necessary condition for raising ambition, but it did not really raise ambition. This is the program going forwards, and the key event is in September this year, when we will have two more reports from the IPCC, one on land use and one on oceans and cryosphere. And in New York, the UN Secretary General is going to be holding a climate summit, where the hope is that different countries will get together and agree on raising the ambition in their NDCs. And now we have a panel of three people who we will ask to talk individually, and then we'll come up and have a chat. We're going to start off with Professor Yi, who is, I'm happy to say, on his first day working with Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, having previously been with the Brookings Institute and with Tsinghua University. So we are delighted to have him providing a lot more effort and substance to our work on climate change. We have Vicky Pollard, who is going to follow him, who has been with the EU Commission on climate change and is now their representative in Beijing on the very important collaboration. Because to me, if there are two countries which are or two groups that are leading the world, there's the country of the People's Republic and there is the EU. Between them, they are both pushing very strongly for the action we need to keep the temperature down. And finally, we have Dr. Agnes Wong, who is from the Environmental Protection Department, who's going to tell you a little bit about her experience at the COP and what the Hong Kong government is doing. So with that, Professor Yi.